Hi, I'm English teacher Kebab from the Kebab Teacher Toolbox. Today we're tackling the biggest problems adult ESL students face: reading, writing, listening, speaking, pronunciation, and grammar. I'll show you practical solutions and real activities and a complete lesson you can use right away. Adult ESL students often struggle to understand fast speech, forget grammar rules, or feel too nervous to speak. Reading feels slow, writing lacks structure, and pronunciation makes communication difficult. Let's look at how to solve these problems step by step. So let's talk about the agenda. What are we going to talk about here today? Well, let's start with talking about reading and writing. And then we'll talk about listening and dictation. And we'll talk about speaking dialogues. After that, we'll talk about pronunciation and then grammar. And then we're going to do a song activity using the song Don't Stop Believin by Journey. And after that, I'll make my final remarks and we will conclude this video. So let's begin with a reading passage that you can see here on the screen. We don't have to read all of it. I'll leave it up for a bit so you can read it while we speak. I like to have students read for 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. I don't like to go too long. And afterwards, and even during the reading, I like to ask some comprehension questions. And here's an example of some of the questions that I will ask that I want them to answer. I just think that's how you test if they understood or not, if they can answer, even if they struggle with the English. If they understand the concept, that's good enough. We'll work on the pronunciation when we get to the pronunciation part, but understanding the concept of the reading is what I want to find out here. From there, I like to have them write. I think putting things into your own words, any student about any subject, being able to put any kind of a subject into your own words and writing especially is big. And writing not only helps with understanding, it actually helps with learning to speak as well, because when you're writing, you're subconsciously storing information in your mind. So after reading, I like students to expand by using some sentence starters. And here's an example of some sentence starters that I like to use. I just think it's very important that students are able to express themselves in writing. It helps on so many levels. So let's talk about listening and dictation. So I like to use the 3-pass listening method, which is listen, chunk, and listen again. So I read the whole thing, then I read it in sections, and then I read it again. And it's important that it's done slowly, not too quickly, because we're dealing with ESL people who are learning English. And so enunciation is key here for helping them to listen. And then I like to do what's called a close exercise, excuse me. And if you don't know what that is, it's spelled with a Z, not an S, C-L-O-Z-E. And it's where you take out certain words in a sentence or a reading, and you have the students put the correct words where the blanks are. It's a good way to build on comprehension, and comprehension is understanding, but it keeps students engaged in what they're reading and what they're trying to write about, and it builds vocabulary. So from there, I like to use dictation. And the way I do it at the end of the week or the end of a lesson, usually which is the end of the week. And I have 10 sentences, starting with a very simple 3 or 4 word sentence. And each sentence gets a little longer, maybe 1 or 2 words longer, where by the time you get to the 10th sentence, It can be a very long sentence, a compound sentence. So by the 10th sentence, it can be a long sentence. I mean, not too long, but it can be a compound sentence that really focuses on them listening. And the way I do it is I read very slowly and deliberately, one word at a time. Again, we're dealing with people who are learning the language, so they need to understand where one word ends and another word begins, and the enunciation and pronunciation is very important. So I tell them up front, I'm going to read each sentence 3 times, not 2, not 4, 3. And don't ask me to repeat because I'm not going to. You need to listen to the 3 times that I say each sentence. And they get used to it, although they still ask, can you say this? Can you repeat that? Nope, I don't do that. That's what dictation is all about. And I also tell them right off the bat, this is not a contest. It doesn't matter what your neighbor is doing. This is for you to help you with your listening and your understanding. And if you get none right, but let's say you just get 1 right, okay, let's try to get 2 right the next time. This is just to see where you stand and to help you improve. And you will improve if you do it regularly, and they do. And what I do is I turn off all of my electronic devices, including my overhead projector, so they can't see what I'm reading. And then I do most of the writing, and I have my students do most of the writing in my class on Zoom. You can use another vehicle as well, but I use Zoom, and they write in the chat. So when I'm done with the dictation portion, I choose at random 3 sentences out of the 10 and have them write it in the chat. I usually start with one of the easier ones, then I have a mid-range sentence as far as the length and difficulty, and I usually go for the last one, the longest one. And I get an idea of who is grasping the material, and then I give them immediate feedback as it comes through the chat. I tell them, call out their name and say, you got this one right? Yeah, almost that one. Hey, you got the last one right too. And they get immediate feedback from me. And once I've gotten a handful, it depends on how big the class is, I will turn the overhead back on and show them all the 10 sentences and let them correct themselves. I want them to see how they did. And then I have them call out, how many did you get right? And at first they're a little reluctant to say it in front of the class, but they get used to it and they feel comfortable with knowing that it's not a contest. And it's something that they get used to, and it's something they actually like to do, even though a lot of them won't admit that. So that's how I do it. Let's talk about speaking dialogues. I like to keep it simple, but I also like to personalize it. I'm showing you a dialogue between Rosa and Ahmed. One student reads one part, the other person reads the other part, and then they switch roles. But what I also like to do is I like to have students be able to insert at least parts of the dialogue with their own information. Maybe not their own personal information, but information that they come up with, that they personalize for the dialogue. I think it makes more sense. I think it's more effective that students, when they put their own information into the dialogue, it makes it easier for them to understand rather than just reading some random dialogue that they have no idea what it's about. So that's the way I like to do it. Let's talk about pronunciation. That's a big one. A lot of students really struggle with pronunciation. So I teach by doing word stress. All right. So for instance, the word market, I teach them about syllables, what a syllable is, and teach them that the vowel sounds are what makes a syllable a syllable. So for the word market, it's market. And I'll put the mar in capitals to show that that's the where the stress is in the word. It's not marquette, it's marquette. And then computer would be computer. And then tomato is tomato. And beginner is beginner. And so on and so forth. Whatever the stressed syllable is, I'll either capitalize it if I'm just showing it to them. If I can make it so they can see what I'm doing, I'll stand up on my tiptoes for the stressed syllable, whatever. Or I'll have them clap, which is how I get them involved. Whatever it takes. They need to see that each word has so many syllables and that there's a stressed syllable in each word. And so those are some of the methods I use. So in a sentence, there are usually stressed words that give the sentence context. And so I will read a simple sentence and change the stress of the words to help them understand the meaning of the sentence, give it some context. So I like to learn English. Okay? Learn is pretty much the stress there. Or I could say, I like to learn English. Or I could say, I like to learn English. Or I like to learn English. Or I like to learn English. They need to understand things like that. That's part of teaching students the nuance of the language. So I encourage students to use Google Translate for audio repetition. I got to also make it very clear that I think of Google Translate as a great starting point, like training wheels on a bicycle or a floaty ring in a pool. If you're going to learn to ride a bike or swim in the pool, you got to take the training wheels off sometime and the floaty, the plastic or whatever they're made of, floaty rings, if you're going to learn to swim. And so, those things get you on a bike or in the water, but at some point you have to actually immerse yourself and do it the right way. So Google Translate is a good way to start, and it does have features that are very helpful, like you can talk to Google Translate and you can also listen to Google Translate. But if you depend on it too much, in my opinion, that can be a downfall. So teaching beginners, I really encourage it. When I teach intermediate, I don't stress it as much, but I tell them, if you don't understand, that's what Google Translate is for, and they understand that. Let's talk about grammar. Boring. Well, it doesn't have to be. It's essential if anybody's going to learn the language. If you don't know the rules, you're never going to really get it. I have students who learn somehow, talking street language, but they never learn they never really understand grammar. So it's essential to pay attention to it and to teach it, but to try to make it, I don't know if fun is the right word, but at least interesting. And I think the best way, the most effective way to teach grammar is to help have the students personalize the grammar. I think any kind of teaching, the more you can personalize it or have the students personalize it, the more it makes sense. If you're talking about some random whatever, it goes over everybody's head, and that's what makes it boring. So I teach the 8 parts of speech one by one, and then I interrelate them as we go. So starting with nouns, and then pronouns. Pronouns takes the place of nouns. And then adjectives. Adjectives describe the nouns, and so on and so forth. And then we use examples, real example. I'll point out students in the class and say, is so-and-so a noun? And yes, they know it's a woman or it's a man or their name. And what's the pronoun for man or woman or this person's name, and so on and so forth. try to personalize it and let them see it in action, not just words on a page. And I like to use word banks to help them build sentences and build their vocabulary. And I'm showing you an example of the word bank, one of the word banks that I use. I talked a little bit about dictation a little bit ago, and I try to incorporate the grammar that I am teaching that week into the dictation sentences. I don't think I mentioned in the dictation section that I always use words and sentences that I have used in the teaching that week, which always includes grammar. So I think that's a very important point when you do dictation and listening, that you don't just pick random things to talk about. You use sentences and words and whatnot that you're actually teaching in the lesson. I think that helps personalize things, and it helps keep things more streamlined rather than just being all over the place. So as I said, grammar is not always going to be fun or interesting, but if you can make it personal, I think that goes a long way. Song activities. Do you use that in your learning or your teaching? If you don't, you should, in my opinion. I think it's invaluable. Music is pleasing to the ear. It does make it a lot more fun. And it allows you to teach in ways that they can hear and see, maybe in a more pleasing way. So I'm talking about the song, in this case, Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. And it's believin', not believing. And it gives me a chance to talk about how proper English is used in everyday language and in songs and lots of places. And it gives me the opportunity to explain what the proper way is, as opposed to what's being used. Because learners hear these things and they don't understand all the time. Sometimes they do, that a word like believing is actually believing, because I'm teaching believing in class, but here's this song saying believing. So it gives me a chance to bridge that gap for them. It sounds simple if you're a native speaker, but to a learner, it makes a lot of difference. And it's kind of fun. I love doing it, and my students seem to like it as well. So I give them the lyrics to read, or if I'm playing a YouTube video or whatever, if it has the lyrics on the screen, that's close enough too. But I usually print out the lyrics for them to look at, and then do another close activity where I leave some of the words out, and after listening or during the listening, they can fill in the blanks. It keeps them engaged. And again, it supports the learning, the grammar part of it, the writing part of it. It's just the way I like to do it, and I can't say enough about it. It gives me a chance to talk about things like contractions and a whole lot of different things. Not to mention the fact that most songs have some kind of a message. So beyond the actual song itself and the melody and everything else, we can actually talk about, what's this person singing about? Things like that. And sometimes it's, you can't go too deep, but it's a good place to start. And it's more than just an English lesson. I will put a link to the YouTube song in the description below if you want to listen to it. So this is where learning gets fun. At least I believe it does, and my students seem to support that. And most of all, it's memorable, and it really does support learning. So if you're not using it, I suggest that you start using it. Okay, we've covered practical solutions for reading, writing, listening, speaking, pronunciation, grammar, and even music. I hope you found this lesson, this video, helpful, informative. And if you did, I hope you will give me a thumbs up in the below the video to show that you liked it. I hope that you will subscribe to this YouTube channel, And if you have questions or comments about anything that is related to this video or even indirectly, please leave them in the comment section that is below the video. I'd love to hear from you. I always respond, and no question all questions are important, so don't be afraid. If there's something I can answer for you, please put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So, in addition, in the description below, I have a link to this complete lesson at my store. So there will be a link for that below. And I also have a blog post on my website that I will post a link to that blog post so you can read the full blog post. And as I mentioned, I hope you will subscribe here for more lessons and teaching strategies. And with that, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.